Ever wonder how a company like Google manages billions of files and like terabytes of data? I mean, where do you even start building a system for that kind of scale?
Right.
Luckily, you sent us this paper, the Google file system.
Yeah, this is
It's a classic.
it's a classic. Yeah, this paper published back in 2003 kind of laid the groundwork for how we handle massive data sets today.
Okay.
Even your cat videos.
Oh, but what's so special about this Google file system? It's not like they reinvented the hard drive, did they?
Not quite, but they did challenge a very fundamental assumption about computer systems,
Okay.
that hardware is reliable.
Okay.
Google realized that when you're dealing with thousands of machines, failures aren't just possible, they're practically guaranteed.
So it's less about preventing failures and more about designing a system that can just shrug them off.
Exactly. And that's GFS's superpower.
Okay.
It assumes things will break, hard drives, servers, even entire racks of equipment.
Wow.
But instead of panicking, GFS just adapts.
Okay, now that's impressive, but how does it actually work?
So imagine a library, right? You've got patrons looking for books, you've got a catalog to locate them, and shelves upon shelves of actual books.
Okay.
GFS is structured very similarly with three key players: clients, a master, and then chunk servers.
Clients being the eager readers, the master, like the superpowered librarian, and the chunk servers are those the bookshelf.
You got it. Clients are your applications or users requesting data.
Okay.
The master is like the ultimate organizer, keeps track of where every single piece of data lives.
And the chunk servers are where the actual information is stored.
Precisely, but here's the first big aha moment about GFS.
Okay.
It doesn't store files as one big lump of data.
Okay.
Instead, it breaks them down into chunks, each a whopping 64 megabytes.
64 megs, that's huge. I mean, most systems at the time were dealing with kilobytes, right?
Exactly. This was a very deliberate choice by Google.
Okay.
Larger chunks mean fewer requests to the master, less metadata to track, and just a much smoother flow of data, especially for those massive files Google routinely handles. Think about streaming a movie. You want to continue a stream, not tiny snippets buffering every other second.
So bigger chunks equal greater efficiency, especially when you're dealing with Google-sized data.
Exactly.
Makes sense. But I have to ask, what happens if a chunk server decides to take an unannounced break? You know, like a surprise vacation or something.
That's where GFS's fault tolerance really shines. Remember, it was built with the understanding that hardware will inevitably fail.
Right.
So instead of putting all its eggs in one basket, GFS makes copies or replicas of each chunk and spreads them across multiple chunk servers and even different racks of machines.
Ah, so if one chunk server goes on that surprise vacation, no problem. There's a backup or two ready to step in.
Exactly.
But how do you keep all those replicas in sync? It seems like things could get messy if they're all being updated at the same time.
Excellent question. And you've hit upon one of the trickiest challenges in distributed systems:
Yeah.
concurrency control.
Yeah.
Imagine multiple people trying to edit the same Google Doc at once.
Chaos, right?
Chaos, exactly.
Yeah. I once had a coworker who loved nothing more than hitting track changes on every single word.
Oh, God.
It was a nightmare.
I can imagine. Luckily, GFS is much more organized.
Okay.
To prevent a free-for-all, GFS
Mm-hmm.
uses a system of leases and mutation order.
Leases, like renting an apartment.
Sort of. The master grants a lease on a chunk to one designated chunk server, making it the primary replica.
Okay.
This primary replica gets to call the shots for that chunk, deciding the order of all changes.
So the primary replica is like the conductor of an orchestra, making sure all the musicians are playing the same tune at the right time.
Exactly. This way, even if multiple clients are making changes, those changes are applied in a consistent order across all replicas, preventing any data corruption.
Okay. That makes sense for planned updates, but the paper also mentions these atomic record appends.
Right.
What happens when multiple clients want to add data to the same file simultaneously? It's like everyone trying to squeeze through a door at once.
You'd think it'd be a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
But that's where the atomic part comes in. GFS ensures that each client's append is treated as a single indivisible operation.
Oh, okay.
Think of it like adding a comment to a popular social media post.
All right.
You might not know exactly where your comment will appear in the thread, but you can be sure it won't get jumbled up with someone else's.
So I might not get to choose the exact byte offset where my data lands, but at least I know it won't get corrupted.
Precisely.
Yeah.
GFS prioritizes getting the data in there reliably and atomically.
Okay.
The paper goes into detail about how applications can deal with the lack of precise control over byte offsets, But the key takeaway is that data integrity is maintained.
Okay, this is all incredibly clever. But even with all this talk about reliability and avoiding data loss, things must pile up eventually.
Right.
What about deleting files? Is that another potential headache in a system this massive?
You'd be surprised. GFS takes a rather relaxed approach to garbage collection.
Relax. You mean like my approach to laundry, let it pile up until I absolutely have to deal with it? Something like that. Instead of immediately deleting a file, GFS marks it with a timestamp and essentially lets it hang out for a while.
Okay.
Think of it like putting something in the recycling bin. It's not truly gone yet, but it's on its way out.
So it's like a grace period for data, just in case you accidentally hit delete on
Right.
that massive spreadsheet you've been working on for months?
Exactly. This delayed deletion acts as a safety net.
Okay.
Plus, it makes the actual process of reclaiming storage space much more efficient.
Okay.
Instead of constantly tracking every deletion, the master can perform a bulk cleanup every so often.
So it's like bulk trash pickup day for data.
Yes,
Efficient, if not exactly instant gratification.
precisely. But this approach does highlight an important point. GFS was designed to optimize for a specific type of workload.
Which is?
Yeah.
So if GFS is taking its sweet time with garbage collection, what kind of workload is it optimized for?
Imagine those massive data sets. Google is known for billions of web pages, search queries, and yes, even cat videos.
Right. These files are typically accessed sequentially, like streaming a movie or appended to, like adding new entries to a log.
Okay.
GFS excels in these scenarios because its entire architecture, from those jumbo-sized chunks to its relaxed approach to deleting files, prioritizes high sustained bandwidth over lightning-fast individual reads and writes.
Makes sense. It's like the difference between a freight train and a sports car.
Exactly.
The freight train might not be winning any races, but it can haul a heck of a lot more cargo over long distances.
Precisely. And speaking of ensuring those freight cars arrive intact, we can't forget about GFS's emphasis on error detection.
Right.
They incorporated something called checksumming to make sure data doesn't get corrupted along the way.
Checksumming. Is that anything like those "did you get my email" texts I send when I'm pretty sure I hit reply but also might have accidentally closed my laptop?
More sophisticated than that, thankfully. Imagine each chunk being divided into smaller blocks.
Okay.
Each of these blocks gets a unique checksum, a kind of digital fingerprint. Whenever a chunk server reads data, it verifies this fingerprint to ensure nothing got scrambled during transmission or while stored on the disk.
So if the fingerprint doesn't match, the chunk server knows something's fishy.
Exactly. It'll raise a red flag, report the issue to the master.
Okay.
And because of that handy replication strategy we talked about, the master can easily provide a fresh, uncorrupted copy of the data from another chunk server.
It's like having a backup quarterback ready to step in if the starter gets sacked.
Right.
Talk about a comprehensive game plan. It sounds like the Google team really thought of everything to make GFS as reliable as possible.
They did, but even they acknowledge that no system is perfect.
Right.
What I find refreshing about the paper is their openness about the challenges they encountered, even with something as seemingly simple as hard drives.
Wait, even Google has hard drive issues. I thought those were a solved problem.
Unfortunately not.
Wow.
The paper highlights how some hard drives claim to support certain protocols, but in reality didn't always behave as expected, sometimes leading to silent data corruption.
Oh, no.
It just goes to show that hardware isn't infallible, and robust error detection mechanisms like checksumming are absolutely essential.
It's like thinking you have the latest GPS navigation, but finding out it's using maps from the dinosaur era. So we've covered GFS's ingenious architecture, its impressive fault tolerance, and even its performance sweet spot. But what's the takeaway for our listener who's been patiently following our deep dive? Why should they care about a file system designed way back in the early 2000s?
Because GFS wasn't just some academic exercise.
Right.
It was built to solve real-world problems at a scale that most people couldn't even fathom at the time.
Right.
And the lessons Google learned are even more relevant today in our world of cloud storage and big data.
Give us the wisdom, O wise one. What are the key takeaways from our deep dive?
First and foremost, always designed for failure.
Okay.
In a distributed system, it's not if things will break, it's when.
Okay.
Secondly, know your workload.
Okay.
There's no one-size-fits-all solution. GFS made deliberate trade-offs to excel in areas crucial for Google's specific needs. And finally, never underestimate the power of simplicity.
Okay.
GFS might seem complex on the surface, but at its heart, it's built on elegant, effectively implemented ideas.
Simplicity on the other side of complexity.
Exactly.
Like that. But as always, we've only scratched the surface here. We want to leave you, dear listener, with a final thought. The paper mentions some limitations in GFS's small file write performance. How do you think GFS might have evolved since its inception, especially with the rise of workloads like social media and the Internet of Things, where millions of tiny updates are the norm? Food for thought, and until next time, keep those deep dives diving.